Good day to each and everyone. Our report is all about social, political, and cultural issues in the Philippine history. In relation to that, it is our objectives to elaborate the agrarian reform policies and to explain the 1899 Malolos Constitution and the 1935 Constitution of the Philippines. Our first topic is concerned to agrarian reform. So what is agrarian reform? Agrarian reform is the redistribution of lands, regardless of fruits produced, to farmers and regular farm workers who are landless, irrespective of tenurial arrangement, to include the totality of factors and support services designed to lift the economic status of the beneficiaries. So, when we say agrarian reform, it refers to the rectification of the whole system of agriculture. It is concerned with the relation between production and distribution of land among farmers. Now let us tackle first the timeline of history of agrarian reform here in the Philippines. We have pre-colonial time, Spanish era, Philippine Revolution, American period, and Philippine independence. Pre-colonial is the time wherein Spaniards were not here yet at the Philippines. So during those time, they already have this term barangay, wherein it means that there is a collective ownership by the chiefs or datos in the community. Basically, it describes that the Maharlikas are owning the land where they belong. Next is the kaingin system or the common land cultivation method, meaning to say that this system is about how we convert an untouched land into an agricultural land, since agrarian reform also means that land is being used into agricultural purposes. During the pre-colonial period, they have two documents of finds that resembles on how we use our land during those times. First is Maragtas Code that tells us about selling of Panay Island by the natives to the 10 Bernian datus in exchange of a golden salakot and a long gold necklace. And second is the Code of Lawaran, or the oldest written laws of the Muslim society, which contains the provision of lease of cultivated lands. Now let's proceed to the Spanish era. We have the term Pueblo agriculture, where pueblo means barrio or community's agriculture. What Spanish did is that they Christianized our native families and has given them a 4 to 5 hectares of land to cultivate. Next is the term Jus Regalia, wherein during those time, it means to them that the land was the property of the Spanish king itself. In the Spanish era also, they have the agricultural tenancy, wherein friars were awarded with lands for the religious order, and then the repartimientos, or Spanish military, are also provided with land due to their service. We also have the encomienda, or a large tract of land given to Spanish encomiendero, or those who manage the land. However, under encomienda system, we have the hacienda system, wherein the native settlers lost their land and were forced to become tillers. In addition to that, we have the compras y bandalas, in which the tillers were made to compulsory sell at a very low price or surrender their harvest to Spanish authorities, and then the encomienderos will resell it for a profit. So in here, we can observe how abusive Spaniards are towards our native farmers, as they made a law in 1865 ordering landholders to register their land holdings. Only those who were aware of these decrees benefited, such as the inquilinos or the Spanish officials and caciques or the local chieftains. As a result, many peasant families were driven out from their lands. Another law is the Ley Hypotecaria or Mortgage Law of 1893, registration of titles and deeds as well as ownership claims. So this law is mainly a law in registration of properties rather than a mortgage law. Then we have a Maura Law or Royal Decree 1894, where farmers and landholders were given 1 year to register their agricultural lands. Next is the Philippine Revolution and Independence. So because of the abuses of Spanish towards us, Filipinos started to revolutionize, and then we became an independent country. Then we established our government that focuses on agrarian reform, which is the Malolos Congress of 1986, Article number 17, which entails that the revolutionary government confiscated the large land states, especially the friar lands, and declared this as properties of the government. However, the Philippine Republic was short-lived, so here comes the American period. As Americans came to our land, they primarily observed that our major problem is landlessness. Due to that, they sought to put an end to that crisis. So here are the following landmarks about agrarian reform legislations that they have implemented. We have the Philippine Bill of 1902, wherein they provided 16 hectares for the private individuals, and for the corporate bodies, they distributed 1,024 hectares of land. They also introduced the torrent system, or the remedy to solve of absence of records of issued titles and land surveys to some 400,000 native farmers. They implemented the Land Registration Act of 1902, or Act number 496, placed all private and public lands under torrent system. We also have the Cadastral Act number 2259 that speeds up the issuance of torrents title. Americans even enacted the Homestead Program of 1903, or the program that allowed an enterprising tenant to acquire at least 16 hectares to cultivate. We also have the first Public Land Act 926 that provides the rules for selling and leasing portions of the public domain, completing defective Spanish land titles. Second Public Land Act of 1919, or Act number 2874, that limits the use of agricultural lands to Filipinos, Americans, and citizens of other countries. And then we have the Tenancy Act of 1933, or Act number 405 and Act number 4113, regulated relationships between landowners and tenants of rights of 50% to 50% sharing. Now let's proceed to Philippine Commonwealth and independence. So let's look to the President's law in relation to this reform. For Manuel Alcazar, he has the rice tenancy law, which is 50% to 50% sharing between landlord and land tenant. Manuel Rojas with Republic Act 34, that is 70% for land tenant and 30% for landlord share agreement. While Ramon Magsaysay implemented the Agricultural Tenancy Act, or the tenurial rights of tenant tillers, and the National Resettlement and Rehabilitation Administration, or NARA, or the tree distribution. We also have Diosdado Macapagal, who is the father of agrarian reform and the one who made the Agricultural Land Reform Code, which abolishes the shared tenancy. He removed the institutionalized leaseholds and freed Filipino farmers from the bondage of tenancy. Next is Ferdinand Marcos, that enacted the Republic Act 6389, or Code of Agrarian Reform, and Republic Act 6390, or Department of Agrarian Reform, and Agrarian Reform Special Account Fund. Next to Marcos is Corazon Aquino, that implemented the Republic Act number 6657, or the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, and followed by Fidel Ramos with fairer, faster, and more meaningful implementation of the Agrarian Reform Program. He enacted Republic Act 7881, Republic Act 8435, and Republic Act 8532. We also have Joseph Estrada with his Executive Order 151, or the Farmers Trust Fund, which allowed the voluntary consolidation of small farm operation into medium and large-scale integrated enterprise to have an access to a long-term capital. And lastly, we have Gloria Macapagal Arroyo with her Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Extension with Reforms, or Republic Act 9700, or also known as CalPER or CARPER. Now for the agrarian reform that we are using, which is the Republic Act number 6657, or called as Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, that was signed by Corazon Aquino on June 10, 1988. So the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law is responsible for the implementation of the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program. It means that CARP is the basis of comprehensive agrarian reform. This act also consists of 78 sections and divided into 15 chapters. For the agrarian reform policies, its scope involves all public and private agricultural lands as provided in Proclamation Number 131 or Instituting a Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program and Executive Order Number 229 or Implementation of CARP. And in terms of schedule of implementation, the distribution of all lands covered by this act shall be implemented and completed within 10 years from the effectivity. Next is retention limit of agrarian reform, which provides 5 hectares plus 3 hectares for each qualified child of the landlord. So the qualified child means that he or she must be at least 15 years old as of June 1988 and directly involved in tilling or managing the farm in question. In addition to that, there is the right to choose the area to be retained, shall be compact or contiguous, shall pertain to the landowner, provided, however, that is the case area selected for retention by the landowner is tenanted. This means that the tenant shall have the option to choose whether to remain there or be a beneficiary in the same or another agricultural land with similar or comparable features. Lastly is the exemptions and exclusions in agrarian reform program. Lands actually directly and exclusively used for parks, wildlife, forest reserves, reforestation, fish sanctuaries and breeding grounds, watersheds and mangroves shall be exempt from coverage of this act. Therefore, this policy clearly describes that agrarian reform is only applicable or land can only be distributed when it is calling for agricultural purposes, particularly for the sake of those who are landless or for our small-scale farmers. So that concludes my report about the agrarian reform policies.